Welcome everyone to this webinar session today. My name is Daniel Kurfes. I'm part of the engineering here in Mannheim, and I'm responsible for UX design and UX design for the Movilizer platform and products. We had the feeling that in the past we somewhat failed at communicating how all the features we were introducing from version to version could be utilized in the most impactful way to design better solutions for our customers. The feature sessions so far had been rather abstract, so we are trying a slightly different approach this time, and basically want to encourage everyone to explore new ways of designing movelets moving forward. This session will be split into two bigger parts. The first part is called Design Patterns, and it will be about general design patterns that can be universally applied to any UI design. So in this session, we will look at it from within the context of Movilizer. So for example, we will provide code snippets and look at actual Movilizer screenshots. And then the second part is the more conventional one, where we just go through all the features and tools that we're introducing with 2.6, with the 2.6 release. For this design patterns part, we picked a few critical topics, though we hope to build upon these and add new content along those lines in the future. But for now, we will start with visual hierarchy and then move on to lists and cards, and then look at navigation and flow paradigms. But actually, before we start, I would like to say a few words about the Honeywell Design Language System, which is a set of platform-agnostic rules and guidelines that help us to, first of all, foster visual and functional consistency, to improve baseline usability, meaning that whenever we follow the rules that are provided by Honeywell in this design language system, we already reach a certain baseline usability because the components in it are proven through various projects and built, this is our last bullet here, build upon prior findings and learnings from various projects and designs. By the way, every Honeywell employee, this is only for Honeywell internals, has access to the HDLS via honeywell.com/brand. And I really recommend to spend a few times, if you haven't done so already anyway, just go through it and read up on it, because it's really well written, really well made, and there are lots and lots of interesting things in there. So whenever you encounter Movilizer products or have encountered them in the past few weeks and months that switched from our black and orange design to the new white and blue theme, this just means that we took another step towards HDLS compliance. And those updates that we did, they always came with many usability improvements, and we want to keep that up. So whenever you see an update and we switch the theme, that just means that we applied HDLS or some level of HDLS compliance to that product. To illustrate the features and design approaches that we are showing this session today, we built a demo app that we call Cobble. And all screen designs you will see during the session are completely native Movilizer screens, which have been tested in a 2.6 alpha client that was provided by the client development team. Except for one example at the very end, no HTML5 screens or mockups have been used to create those screens that you will see during the session. So we're starting with the visual hierarchy, which is a fundamental discipline within graphic design. And it's basically about introducing depth and structure to your screen designs in order to establish a hierarchy of elements and help your users understand contents and affordances on a screen at a glance, meaning that whenever they are in a certain context, they can very easily comprehend what their task is that they have to do, how they have to interact with a certain form or screen, and so on. Here we have two examples of screen designs. It's the same content. On the left, we have a very conventional plain Movilizer screen with just one element after the other. And on the right, we see a more structured approach in which design aspects such as typography and scale, color and contrast, space, order and alignment, and grouping have been carefully considered to make the affordances of the screen context much easier to understand. So if you compare those two screens, at least we hope that in the right example, it's just easier to see the priority of the different elements and to understand what needs to be done to be able to progress. And you can see every element that is in the screen on the left is also on the screen on the right. And if we look at, for example, this menu section with the three buttons in the left, there we have something like back to main menu. We move that in the right design to the header to have a consistent button that is always as an action button in the header menu, and so on. So we went through every element and cleaned the screen up with all the capabilities, the layout capabilities that have been added with mostly Movilizer 2.5 and 2.6. So here we see on the right, we see highlighted one part of that screenshot from the last slide. And we can see that this prior training section, it appears as one visual unit to the user, but in fact it's still three completely separate answers within one text item screen. The blue bits represent margins, and the orange little squares, they represent paddings. And you can see in that code example on the left, we set the question background color to a light gray and then moved the question, the answers a bit, so you can see the light gray background and the answers have a white background. And by cleverly setting up the margins and paddings, this element appears as one. And in this way, you have, basically this is just a different approach to using the separators or spacers, and it makes the layout very well structured and also visually appealing. And there are many things that you can do with those new padding margin capabilities. So as most of you know, Movilizer has a very strong SAP background. And in SAP world, everything is tables. So it's no surprise that the table screen or the different table screens that we offer were introduced relatively early on during the development of the Movilizer platform. Tables, however, are not something you typically see in mobile apps. In fact, whenever possible, designers and developers should try to avoid them when building handheld experiences. But no reason to worry, there are many clever ways to replace tables in your design. Mostly utilizing the text item screen, all kinds of card and list layouts can be built, and by that you will be able to make complex data much more accessible to your users. Thanks to horizontal grouping and some mass scripting, it's also possible to design tabbed layouts, which will make navigating complex context even more convenient. So there are many strategies that can be applied to make your app easier to navigate, easier to understand, and so on. In this case, we used, again, many margin and padding settings on the answers, on the question, on the complex groups. And we worked a lot with horizontal alignment. And again, we added the tabs. And in the case, in these examples, we basically have a menu to access open orders. And with the right design, a lot of information is presented to the user, which helps him to make better educated decisions when progressing on from that context. So the user doesn't have to dig down into the elements first. This quite sophisticated list layout that we see here just makes a lot of information available at a glance, but still keeps it structured, keeps it easy to understand. Again, we use the strategies that we saw before to introduce more visual hierarchy. We see that, for example, the titles are bold and large. We see the main button, the plan task button, which is the first thing that pops out, and so on. Still, in many cases, well-designed flow and a solid navigation architecture both are even more critical for a satisfying user experience than individual screen designs. So here we will have a quick look at how to establish a solid app structure and facilitate an efficient task flow from start to finish. So while Movelizer's Movelet paradigm is certainly elegant for what it is and for what it wants to achieve, but users are typically not used to it at all. It's like nothing that is common or that you find in any other application or on any other platform. There are ways and techniques to make a Movilizer app look and feel like a modern standalone app and hide all those Movilizer-specific UI aspects under the hood. Some of the building blocks that you can utilize to make the Movilizer UI disappear is, first of all, using a custom client with predefined app group. So you can throw your users directly into the app without showing them the conventional and sometimes confusing participant login screen. Next building block is the auto-execute timeout set to -1, which will throw your users directly into the movelet where you want to start the experience. Then obviously, you will have to build a tailored login. We did that in several projects, and that always works well. You have more freedom when it comes to the layout in a custom login and make it just more usable than what we currently have in place as the native participant login. Same is true for the home screen. Instead of just presenting the movelets, you can, for example, you can build anything as your home screen. You can do very sophisticated layouts and build something that is, again, more usable than just presenting your users with the movelets that they synced to their device. You can provide all kinds of means to navigate more effortlessly. For example, the action button in the header that can also be a menu and be utilized in an even more powerful way. You have to make or should make use of data containers to better structure your sync processes, and then generally build a solid structural backbone of your movelet. What we're looking at right now is a quite sophisticated app architecture that was provided to me by our DSD team. And the actual app is really just one layer in a multi-layered movelet setup. And when you look at this diagram, only the red elements of the app ever appear on the user screen. So let's go through it. We start at the native login that we can skip by predefining an app group in a custom client. and then the native main menu, and so on. Again, with the auto execute timeout, we will move the user without them knowing through these steps until they reach the custom login without seeing any of the other steps. And in this setup, the master movelet that you can see below the custom login that handles all the navigation between screens and sends parameters back and forth. So the Movilizer still knows where the user is. And then the sync adapter is its own component that handles all the syncing. And then you can see, like, when, in case it is necessary, you can, from the UI layer, via a pin, you can reach an admin menu, and that admin menu can then again bring you back to the native main menu where you have all the elements that you're used to, like the sync button, the settings button, and so on. So next we are going to have a look at the various features and tools that were introduced, will be introduced with the 2.6 release. First of all, we will look at the standard features that you will have on every platform. And next we will see or have a look at voice-driven apps, which is really exciting. And then in the end, we will also check our Adobe XD UI kit, which is a tool that we developed to help multidisciplinary teams to work on Movelets. So the focus areas for this release have been, first of all, we made some big steps towards Honeywell DLS compliance, the design language system that I mentioned earlier. We have many more granular layout capabilities that were introduced. We have new and improved form and navigation controls. And then we have several new components to visualize data in very powerful ways. So here you can see a representation of all the features at a glance, but we will go through them one by one anyway, so I won't read them here. Again, every example that I will show will be in the context or showcased in the context of our demo app to hopefully, well, better explain what the considerations behind every new capability were and to illustrate some typical use cases as we identified them. So we start with something that is not very spectacular, but still helpful. We introduced several new font sizes that can be applied to any item except for input fields. Additionally, to small, normal, large, and very large screen font sizes, we now have extra large, XX large, and XXX large. And those new font sizes, they can, for example, be used to achieve editorial-like layouts or design visually interesting, I don't know, e-commerce UIs, for example. So many use cases for those. We have a fallback here in place, protocol V16 to 15 conversion. It maps all new sizes. So all three new sizes will just be mapped to very large. As already mentioned several times, we have improved the margin and padding capabilities a lot. All kinds of layouts are much easier to achieve than before, thanks to that. First of all, we introduced new margin and padding sizes. Again, we had none, small, medium, large. Now we have additionally extra large, XX large, XXX large. And you can see the pixel density independent pixels for those sizes. And they are supported for questions, question texts, as well as answers, and even they can even be defined for horizontal groups. And the horizontal groups, they are normally not rendered themselves, but you can add a margin to them. You can see that in the example on the right. The purple arrow is pointing at a margin top for or applied to a horizontal group, the one that says area, work order number, and date raised. Margins and paddings can be defined as global customization property. They can be set for all 4 sides of an element or individually for top, right, bottom, left. Or what is really helpful and is very similar to how you would do it, for example, in CSS, you can set padding extra large to an answer, for example, and then granularly adjust with padding bottom none. So in this example, padding for left, top, and right would be extra large, and the padding bottom would be reset to none. Paddings and margins are applied hierarchically in a very reasonable way, meaning that global customization property will be the weakest, and then it gets stronger from question to answer to mel. And that helps you to really granularly adjust your designs. So for example, you could set margin padding globally for answers to get a consistent look and feel, and then adjust granularly as needed down to the answer, and then even dynamically, for example, you could set margins and paddings with mel. Here are some code snippets around padding and margin. What is interesting is, for example, if you set paddings and margins via mel, you can omit a certain value by using -1. So for example, here you can see the set answer margin is set to -1, 2, -1, 1. So it will omit, I hope I'm correct in thinking that -1 is top, and then 2 would be right, -1 again would be bottom, and 1 would be left. So the padding and margin for, or in this case, the answer margin for top and right would just be left as it was before, and only right and left would be set to 2 and 1. Then we have the syntax to set identical margins and paddings for all 4 sides, which is just set question padding to 2, so very straightforward. And as already mentioned, we can apply margin to horizontal groups. We have new required attribute that allows to add a required indicator to input fields and to block forward navigation in case a certain requirement is not met. And the implementation here is very straightforward. It's supported for all kinds of inputs like text input, radio button, group, dropdown, and so on. And you just set the answer, you set the attribute required to true. And after that, it works basically out of the box. You can also set the required attribute via mel. And you can see the snippet down there, set answer required to true. And you will get those indicators and also a little message telling the user what went wrong. This is also a very convenient new feature. We can now add input field actions to input elements. And you can, for example, you can see that in the screenshot, for example, for equipment ID. You can just press the little barcode button that is in that box to bring up the barcode scanner and scan a code instead of entering the string manually. For the comment box, we chose the share content action, which just allows the user to share the content in the box using the native OS UI. In this case, iOS would bring up the overlay that you see on the right and will allow your users to share that text to their apps like they used to. The new answer level attribute input field action is very straightforward. You just put in what you need. So, for example, go to is a jump, scan any will open the scanner with which you can scan basically anything, but you can also set a specific scanning process, like, for example, 2D data matrix or a 2D QR code, a conventional barcode, and so on. And again, you can set it via mail too. Radio button groups can be logically grouped, but rendered in different places, or grouped in one answer. That is also a very convenient thing. I added an example on the right where you can order cobble merchandising, and first the user has to select how he would like to do the payment, either credit card or crypto. And you can see it's two answers that are like, we have the first answer with credit card, which is attribute type 37, and then some other answers below that, building the form for the credit card input, and then only afterwards you can see the crypto radio button. So you have one answer per single select item, and you group them via attribute. So you add the radio button group ID, for example, 1, to signal to the Movilizer, okay, those two are, they belong to each other, they are related, and based on that, you can build whatever scripting you need to achieve what you need here. And then we have the radio button group in one answer, where you use attribute type 38. You can see that in the right example, we can select between 3 different crypto payment networks, and those are just one answer, and the individual single select items are item elements, as you can see on the left. One item per single select item grouped in an answer, and the answer, basically the answer itself, defines the radio group. This one is rather simple. The link element is just a nice addition to what we already have in the text item screen. The link text item is rendered like a hyperlink. It also behaves like a hyperlink. It can have an icon, but doesn't have to. You can see that in the examples on the right. The retake photo link doesn't have an icon, whereas does have an icon, whereas on the right, in the right example, the forget password and about cobble do not have any icons. The link color can be defined globally, and the default color is blue. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the HGLS Honeywell compliant blue. They can be aligned and styled just like other labels, and they can be used in, and now it's getting a little more interesting, they can be used in the text item screen with the new attribute type 39. Can also obviously trigger a screen value change event. And then we also introduced a new question type, a new menu screen, link menu screen, type 19, that is a menu that is rendered with links instead of how the menus were or are rendered usually. So this is, I think this is a big one. The new modals, they let you provide quick information and gather responses in a very usable, very robust way. You can see on the left, we have 2 example screenshots. We have a history of certain items, and you can add a new item, basically add a report to that list of reports with the plus button in the header action menu. And that will bring up a modal. And you can see we have a title, we have a little introduction to the model, and then we have 2 inputs. Again, we use an input action to scan the equipment ID, and we can either confirm or cancel that modal. The models are fully customizable, colors, typography, and so on. You can design them freely or use templates. Like, for example, we have the notification model that only has a confirm button. For example, if you want to notify the user that he has to, they have to take care of a certain thing. And then we have the validation model that will present the user with both a cancel and a confirm button. Cancel just will do nothing, and with the confirm button, you could trigger a certain logic. And then again, for that logic, pull the data that was entered into the model. And basically, you just group answers into a dialog using the new attribute dialog ID. So let's say in the case on the right, we would have that introduction text and 2 inputs. And to those answers, you would just add the dialog ID. And then via mel, you could trigger that dialog, show it with the dialog ID. And that is supported in on-enter assignments, on leave OK prepare, on screen value change event, though only the asynchronous one, and on external event. So that is very helpful and will enable you to build many things that were just more difficult to build earlier. And again, it's a pattern that your users will already be used to from other mobile apps. And yeah, it's a nice thing. I really like that new feature. For the mesh screen, we added draggable pins. So in the example on the right, let's say we are a delivery driver and we saw a new, I don't know, some kind of new outlet popped up, and we want to add this to a map of outlets. We could, in this case, add a name, type of facility, or this is a maintenance example, so it would not be a shop, it would be something else, some kind of facility. The map would already pull my GPS information, but maybe for whatever reason, either I'm not directly in front of the store, but sitting in my van, or the GPS information is for whatever reason wrong. I could take the pin, pull it to a new place, pull it exactly where I need it, and then use that coordinates and save them. Individual pins can be defined as draggable using the attribute type 75. And as I already mentioned, upon dragging a pin to a new location, the new coordinates can be fetched and used for further processing, for example on leave or on screen value change. And the value will be stored in the reply. This again is a very powerful new feature. It's a new screen type called the tile screen. And it will allow you to build dashboards like you can see in the example on the right. This is just one tile screen, no complex grid. This is really just one screen or one question, however you would like to call it. There are different types of tiles that you can use. There is, for example, the simple value tile. There is an icon tile. There is an image tile, a progress donut, a progress bar, and a star rating. You can see the attribute types, the corresponding ones. The tile relative dimensions can be set to what you see here, quarter, 1/3, half, 2/3, and so on, for the width and the height. And there is, when you set up a layout like this, your tiles will be aligned according to a really clever grid logic completely automatically. So you set up this layout with the relative dimensions, and the Movilizer will build you this layout like you can see on the right. I put some examples in there. For example, these little buttons with icons in there, their width and height have been set to quarter, so they take up quarter of the width of the screen, like you can see. And yeah, this way you can build really nice grids using this new tile screen. You can build very beautiful dashboards with that. Another powerful new screen type, this again goes into the direction of data visualization. We have the chart screen now finally, and you can decide whether your chart should be rendered stacked or not, and also select between different chart representations. We have a pie chart, a donut chart, a line chart, spline, and bar chart. And the setup is as follows. One chart is always one question or one screen. And via the answers, you set up all these things. So you can see the attribute types on the left. To set the chart type, you would have an answer with type 86 and so on. Then you would have one answer with attribute type 89 to have a donut chart like we can see on the right, and then add data points via answers, define the axis for those column types where it actually makes sense to have access. And we introduce several new attributes to set up your charts, like chart ID, data column ID, axis ID. Yeah, just makes sense, like what you need to set up these charts. And then we have attributes that are similar to what we see in tiles with relative width and relative height. So it's maybe not as straightforward as the tile screen, but still relatively easy to do and very powerful. Again, you can do lots of things with that. You can, for example, like in this screenshot that we have on the right, you can combine it with the tile screen to create a very informative dashboard. There are several additional MEL methods and features that have been introduced, but they maybe not directly affect the UI. So some new MEL features in 2.6 include Bluetooth low energy support, GPS capturing support for Cordova, get image dimensions for binary data, sort by table column, clear web view cache, and modulo with decimals. Starting with 2.6, you will be able to design and develop voice-driven apps on the Movilizer platform. So your field and warehouse workers have their hands free for a safer, faster, and smarter experience. And that is something that I really like. I worked in several projects already where we played around with RealWare's HMT1 device. For those of you who haven't tried it yet, it is a purely voice-driven device. It has a small screen that you can see on that arm that sits right next to your eye. It has a very sophisticated microphone that works in even the most extreme conditions. So if you're in a noisy environment, and you have a camera above the eye to capture defects or scan barcodes, that works really, really well and really fast. The device is ruggedized and the battery can be hot swapped, which is also very helpful. Like it's really made for use in all kinds of environments. So far, our voice-driven support is limited to the RealWare head-mounted tablet devices, like the one that you see here, the HMT1. But I'm sure other devices will follow. Here we have some code snippets. The implementation is really easy. For example, you have this attribute use answer text as voice command that you can set to true, and then your answer, whatever you have, like for example, if you have a multi-select, you can trigger it by just saying the text of the answer. So in the example on the right, you see a maintenance app with a conversational UI approach where the voice assistant that we developed asks questions, and gives feedback to the user. So you can actually talk to the device, talk to Movilizer, and it's rather straightforward and simple to set up something like that. In this case, the user would have to prepare a replacement, and the application would ask them, confirm the temperature measured is below 86 degrees. And then by just saying confirm temperature, like you can see on the right, we set use answer text as voice command to true for this answer. We would trigger whatever action is behind it, be it a button or a checkbox or a single select, doesn't matter. We would trigger it by just saying the answer text. And so you can basically move your user through the whole flow by listening to events triggered by the interactions. And yeah, it's very neat. You can also, like if you don't want to use the answer text, you can also set custom voice commands. For example, let's say in your UI, for whatever reason, you have a very long string. In the example on the left, I put check temperature for oil pump A002. That, of course, the user will understand what they need to do, but it's not really practical as a voice command because it takes a lot of time. There is a big risk that the user is interrupted while they're saying it and so on. So you can set a custom voice command for something like that and just set, for example, confirm temperature, which will make it much more usable and easy. We also have the text-to-speech method that we used in that conversational UI approach, where you can trigger, in many ways, you can trigger a text-to-speech. For example, check complete, continue in this snippet right here. And you can set voice commands via mail, like you would imagine. Yeah, in this example, we're even concatenating strings to a voice command, so we can have dynamic voice commands that might be interesting. For example, if you have big lists and you have to select an item from that list, but you want to have a custom voice command, you need to be able to set voice commands dynamically. I will show you a very quick demo of one of the apps that we built. Please note that the frame rate of the screen capturing is very slow. I also hope that you will be able to hear everything. The application itself, by the way, runs very smoothly on the device itself, and it's really a pleasure to use it when it's set up properly. But again, the screen capturing is a bit slow and looks a little bit laggy, especially when we open the camera. My programs, Movilizer HMT1.
Activate Movilizer Voice Assistant.
Activate and remember my choice. Continue.
Enter a username and password or scan ID card.
Scan ID card. Action. Continue.
Select a work order.
Order 2.
Review work order before confirming qualification.
Continue.
Are you qualified to carry out the tasks related to this order?
I'm qualified.
Take a photo of your safety equipment.
Take photo. Continue.
Please stand by for safety check confirmation. Confirm all required tools are available.
Confirm temperature gun. Confirm multimeter.
Continue to navigation.
Continue. Continue.
Confirm logout, tagout.
Confirm shutdown. Confirm isolation.
Continue to tasks menu.
Continue.
Select task.
Oil levels.
Check oil level for conservator tank.
Confirm oil level.
Now, check oil level for glucose relay.
Confirm oil level.
Select task.
Component check.
Check for any oil leakage.
Confirm no leakage.
Now check the breathing status for all transformers.
Confirm status.
All tasks completed. Continue and restore equipment.
Continue.
Restore equipment.
Confirm connection. Confirm power.
Continue to material confirmation.
Continue. Add material. Select item 1. Cancel. Continue.
Send order.
Send order.
No pending work orders.
We built these demos and applications, but we also created an experience design guidelines document where we, first of all, everything that we learned in that process, we documented it. Like, for example, there are some things that are very different between a typical UI, a typical graphical user interface where you interact by touching or clicking, and a voice-driven UI where the user is, first of all, the screen on this device is very small and hard to read. So there are many things that have to be considered. First of all, we have the say what you see paradigm, which just means that you should always, as a designer or developer, clearly present all available voice commands in a certain context. You saw that we designed all the buttons to be blue and bold, so whenever a user enters a new context, immediately they will be able to identify the possible interactions. There are also some things that are specific to voice recognition, like, for example, we recommend use commands with 3 syllables. 2 is still possible, but tricky, and 4 is just too long. And then keep elements, like visual elements, close to the center of the screen. So, for example, if the HMT1's screen is not set up perfectly, the user is still able to see everything he needs to see to perform his actions. This document, I think we will probably distribute it to partners and developers in some way very soon. So what we built, because there was a big need for something like that, especially if we work in big projects with many suppliers, in interdisciplinary teams with, for example, designers who do not have a lot of technical background or not a very technical background in general, or designers and developers who are not used to Movilizer specifically. So we created this Adobe XD UI kit to improve the collaboration and, like stated here, better integrate external UX professionals into design processes. And in this wireframe kit, I have some examples here. This is based on a UI design application built by Adobe, which is relatively new. I think it's out of beta now, though I'm not sure, but it can be used really well for quick screen designs, but also sophisticated flows. And it's also very easy to build a library of fonts, colors, and UI components. So if you use the components provided here, you will only be able to build Movilizer layouts that are also feasible, like this was the goal. So whoever designs a Movilizer screen design will probably design something that is that we are able to actually build. Also, what is really nice, even if you build a very large, complicated application, by changing parameters of this library, you can retheme your app. Like, for example, you can test different colors before you go into the Movelet definitions, or before you create a custom client. You can test those customizations in the wireframe kit or the UI kit. And of course, you can live test your screen layouts on your mobile device as you design them when you plug it in. So you already see all the proportions and everything. You can click through a design. You can build clickable wireframes that you are also able to share via a link, and other people will be able to comment on that. So that's pretty nice. We have one example. This is the HTML5 example that I mentioned. This is an HTML5 dashboard that was created within Adobe XD. On the left, we can see a library of character styles, colors, and the UI components. And it's a bit subtle, but when I now move to the next slide, you will see how in a matter of seconds, you can change the color theme completely, replace fonts, and so on. So very, very helpful tool for us designers to better communicate between each other, but also to developers. As I already mentioned, you can not only design screen designs, but also quickly wire up clickable prototypes and then share and review those via hyperlink or present them on a mobile device, depending on where you present them and to whom. So that's basically it. Thanks a lot for your attention.